Hey guys, we're here with Dr. Mike Warholic of Valvoline's R&D. Thanks for coming out today.
My pleasure.
So let's talk about oils, and specifically, technicians tend to think all oil is oil, but why is it important to have a good recipe, a balanced recipe when it comes to oil?
Yeah, I think the same thing actually when I first joined the industry 25 years ago. Oil's oil, right? But the more I've learned, the more complex it gets actually, and so we're still trying to perfect the oil and perfect the formulations. But each of these bottles, the oil that's in these bottles, contains probably 20 different components to bring the performance that it needs. 80% of it is base oil, so just a basic organic molecule that helps lubricate the engine, right? And that's 80% of it. That's the largest piece of it. 10% of it is actually viscosity modifier. Viscosity modifier is used to get the 5W30 or 0W20 because as oil heats up or cools down, the viscosity changes. You can imagine microwaving maple syrup. So if you pull maple syrup out of the refrigerator, it's kind of thick. Yeah. You nuke it, it thins out, right? That happens in an engine. You don't want that to happen. You want the oil viscosity to maintain across the temperature range in an engine. It does vary a fair amount from a startup on a winter day in the morning to when the engine gets up to full temperature. So you have to balance the right amount of viscosity modifier to get the viscosity grade. And then you get into the actual performance components. So keeping the engine clean. So there's detergents and there's dispersant molecules, we call them, that basically grab a hold of the byproducts and keep them in solution or attach themselves to the wall of the engine to keep it clean, to protect it. So keeping it performance-wise there is very important. Then you talk about wear. So wear performance, as you can imagine, all those moving parts, all those metal pieces moving together, you're going to get some wear. The oil does a lot of that work, but you need to also protect the surfaces. So we use things like zinc dialkyl-dithialphosphate. So it's a mouthful. It's called zinc by most people. It actually breaks down and forms a zinc layer on the surface of the engine and protects that surface temporarily, because it will actually break off and you have to replenish that. That's why you have to change your oil, because some of those molecules actually do break down when they do their job. There are other anti-wear additives in there too. Moly is a very popular one nowadays. It also is a very good friction modifier. The other component that's in there more recently, because of all the CAFE limit restrictions and just the ever increasing efficiency of engines, you want better and better fuel economy, right? So friction modifiers are added to actually decrease the friction at the surface. And they're organic molecules that make kind of a shag carpeting at the surface of the engine and keep it flowing even better than it would have with just oil itself, right? And so those molecules have different structures, they have different chemistries, but ultimately they're in there to give you better fuel economy. So when you look at all those components, and there's even a couple more in there, we have anti-foamants to make sure it doesn't foam up like a beer. There's other things in there, and they have to be balanced properly. A lot of those molecules don't like each other very much either. And if you don't balance them properly, you'll get sediment and you'll get fallout and precipitate. So if you open up one of these oils a year later, there could be solids on the bottom. So you have to balance also the stability of the oil too. So it just gets more and more complex. And with today's engines, with turbochargers, with variable valve timing, cam phasers, I mean, the oil's doing a lot more in there. And so we have to make sure the formulations can meet the task.
And that's why it's so important the recipe is on par.
Exactly, yeah. So the recipe has to meet not only the minimum performance standards that the OEM requires, but also above and beyond that for, say, a particular type of oil that we may be marketing to the consumer.
So with so much care going into the formula of the oil itself, how important is the filter that you pick?
It's critical. So if you look at the oil system in an engine, you have the oil pump, you have a filter, and then you have the galleries where the oil flows to all the engine parts, right? So it's a constant circulation. And the oil can actually absorb and solubilize a lot of the precipitates and the solids and from soot and sludge, et cetera, but it can't get everything. So there's always particulates that need to be filtered out, and that's what the filter does. So it removes those things the oil can't handle. From a lifetime perspective, if you look at it, the oil filter can reach capacity also. So you have to be careful when you're looking at oil drains. The filter itself can also reach capacity, and you want to change that out too. You always want to use the OEM recommended filter, right? So it fits properly, it has the right pressure drop across the filter, along with the right viscosity grade, because that oil loop or that circulation, it takes pressure to get through a filter. If you use too heavy of an oil, it may not flow that well through that filter, and your oil may slow down in that circulation loop and may not get refreshed as much as it should. So again, mating the oil, the viscosity grade, the specification with the right filter is critical to engine performance.
Okay, so then that's maybe leads me into my next question is how Valvoline sets themselves apart from their other competitors maybe with their performance standards?
Yeah. Well, we were the first motor oil brand, so 1866 is when we were first became a motor oil brand in the industry. So we've been doing it for a while, almost 160 years, I think, next year, if my math is right. So we have a lot of history, a lot of legacy, and we also have a lot of innovative scientists who are working behind the scenes. We're also the only oil marketer that has an engine lab, a full functioning engine lab in Ashland, Kentucky, where we have several engine stands that are running the industry tests. So they run deposit tests, they run a sludge test, fuel economy, chain wear. All those tests are run at that engine lab, and we have access to that. So we can tweak one of our formulations, try a different formula one day, see how it works, then tweak it the next day, and run it in that engine and see how it works. So we're constantly trying to perfect the oil. We also have a tribology lab. So tribology is a study of how surfaces move together. We have a lab in Lexington, Kentucky that does that on bench testing. So it's a very simple way of measuring friction and wear. And so we're constantly generating data over and over again to try to perfect these different pieces of the performance of an oil ultimately. So that's what really sets Valvoline apart. Our capability, and also our marketers. So our innovative marketers are out there asking consumers, what do you want your oil to do? So that's where Restore and Protect came from, for example. They want better deposit control. Even OEMs want better deposit control. So that's where that came from. That was the kernel of an idea, and then about 4 or 5 years later, we actually were able to develop the formulation. So it takes time, and you have to have patience. But again, data-driven is the key.
That's incredible. So that leads me to my next point too, is that builds trust with the technicians, so they can trust the product that you're putting out.
That's right.
And then you also help formulate Partsmaster as well. So why should technicians trust Partsmaster over some other brands that they might be familiar with?
Yeah, absolutely. So Partsmaster builds on the same technology foundation for the Valvoline branded products that are out there, right? So the same lab, the same scientists are developing those Partsmaster formulations. We also are testing them in the same equipment, so our engine lab and our tribology lab, et cetera. We're also making those products in the same plants. So if you think about, the blending of oils, the packaging of oils, the quality to make sure that the product in the bottle is the same every time is just as important as the R&D that's done up front. So there you have Partsmaster being blended and packaged by Valvoline plants in the same facilities that the Valvoline branded product is. So ultimately, Partsmaster has the full weight of Valvoline behind it from a technology perspective, supply chain perspective. So that builds trust, I think, with the consumer.
Yeah, I think it does. Well, I appreciate you coming out today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Guys, we got a lot of info at you today, but thanks for watching.